Welcome to Cats and Clickers, brought to you by the Behavior Department. My name is Amanda. So today we're going to dive a little bit more into the whole idea of being a Cats and Clicker volunteer. And so before we get started, I just want to show you this fun little cartoon write-up about the complexity of a cat's brain. So take a look at it and read all the different aspects of a cat's brain. So you recently watched Learning Theory that kind of talked to you more about operant conditioning. Well, that is what we do here as Cats and Clickers volunteers. And so we are going to dive even more into that aspect of operant conditioning and again, how it will play a part for your role as a Cats and Clickers volunteer. So just as a reminder, operant conditioning is where a behavior is followed by some sort of consequence. That consequence is then going to alter the frequency of that behavior. So a behavior followed by a good consequence increases the frequency, a behavior followed by no consequence decreases the frequency, and then a behavior followed by a bad consequence decreases the frequency but at a faster rate. So just as a reminder, there are a few things that have to happen for operant conditioning to be successful. So the first thing is timing. So timing really speaks to the whole idea of when that consequence follows that behavior. Here, as a Cats and Clickers volunteer, timing is also going to speak to when you click, making sure that you click at the right time, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit. Other things is the animal's perspective. So the whole idea of a bad consequence and a good consequence, you have to make sure that your animal that you're working is also perceiving it as the same way. And then lastly, as a reminder, not all consequences are controlled by us. So sometimes there's just instant gratification. So for cats specifically, if a cat, house soils, they are getting instant gratification for relieving themselves. And so unfortunately, depending on where they were to soil in the house, that behavior may start to increase because again, as soon as they did house soil, they felt better about that aspect. So instant gratification. So again, not all consequences are controlled by us. And so behaviors will still increase and decrease on their own. So good consequences. So again, that is more of what we do at the Dumb Friends League, is the whole idea of good consequences that lead more into the aspect of clicker training. So again, just as a reminder, a behavior followed by a good consequence is going to increase the frequency of that behavior. We refer to that aspect of increasing the frequency as reinforcement. You can have positive reinforcement and you can have negative reinforcement. So positive reinforcement speaks to the idea of adding something the animal likes, and negative reinforcement speaks to the aspect of subtracting or removing something the animal doesn't like. So both aspects, both positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, are still going to increase the frequency of that behavior. And so again, we refer to that as the reinforcement as the increase in frequency. So types of good consequences or reinforcers. For positive, we have things like food, praise, attention, touch, play, maybe access to something. And negative reinforcement are going to be the removal of things like discomfort, pain, fear, or a threat. So here's kind of an example. I like getting a treat when I sit on cue. So next time my person says sit, I'm going to do it so I'll get another treat. So again, the behavior of sit is followed by the treat. So the cat learns that because I sat, I got the treat, so they're more likely going to sit. So clicker training, again, it is a type of positive reinforcement training. So we are adding something the animal, or in this case, the cat, likes. So if you have never done clicker training, we're going to talk a little bit more about it, why we do it, what it's about, things like that. So the first thing we'll talk about is what is clicker training. So it's really simple. Again, it's just a type of positive reinforcement training that has a clicking device that acts as a marker. So basically we're able to capture or mark that specific moment that the cat does the behavior. So it's just a sound that lets them know they did the right thing. The sound, though, is not what they're working for. They're working for the treat that follows. So click means treat is coming. We can use it to shape a behavior, or again, we can capture a behavior. And because we are able to capture that moment and follow that by a treat, that makes the frequency of that behavior go up. And then just a little bit about training in general. When a cat is offering a behavior pretty consistently, that's when we can start to present that cue and pair the cue with the word. So clicker training, again, is just another form of positive reinforcement training that allows us to get a behavior on cue. The great thing about clicker training is there's no force involved. So we're not going to manipulate these cats in any way. So the old way of training an animal, if you wanted them to sit, would be to, kind of push their bottom down until they sit, and you would follow that with a treat. Clicker training does not do that at all. We are not going to put our hands on these cats. We're not going to force them to do anything that they don't want to do. We are going to capture and shape those behaviors, and by, again, clicking for the behavior we want and reinforcing, that's going to increase the likelihood of them doing that behavior. So for those of you who like the science behind things, we did kind of want to give you an idea of how the whole click is processed. So when a cat first hears the click, it is processed in the reactive part of the brain. So this is the part that doesn't have any cognitive thinking, any action. It is basically that fear response. So when they hear it, it's either that fight or flight kind of stuff. So they're not processing at this point when they first hear the click. What happens is we do the click treat aspect, and that's where it goes over to the seeking part of the brain. So this is the part of the brain that drives an animal to explore, to find food. The great thing about this part of the brain is it's opened up with positive reinforcement. So they are willing to learn, they're open to learning as long as that reinforcement, that positive reinforcement is involved. The downside, though, is this area of the brain shuts down really quick with punishment. So we want to make sure that in our sessions we are staying positive across the board so that we keep that cat open to learning new things. So what we need to be successful, so the number one thing is a good consequence worth working for. So again, back to the whole idea of the animal's perspective. So what we use here in the shelter is different high value food. So things like meat, baby food, tuna fish, and certain cat treats that cats really like Temptations. Play can also be a really good consequence, and then petting. Not all cats in a shelter want to be pet, but for those that do, we can always use petting as a reinforcer. The other thing that's really important, again, is that timing aspect. So we kind of touched on this a little. The two things that you need from timing perspective is the right time for clicking, but also the right time for delivering that consequence. So if we don't click at the right time, so say we are working on sit with our cat, if our cat sits down and then goes to stand up and we click too late, we're more likely going to be clicking when they're standing up, so we might be reinforcing the wrong behavior. The other thing is that delivery of consequence. If we don't click and then give a treat within a good time frame, our cat has already thought about the next thing. So click ends up meaning nothing because they're not getting that click treat association. If you find that you struggle with timing and multitasking, a great way to practice is just go find yourself a tennis ball and practice clicking with that tennis ball. So the first thing you can start is bounce that tennis ball. Every time it hits the ground, I want you to click. And then a way to challenge yourself is don't drop the ball at the same speed. Kind of vary it up on how hard and how soft that you drop it. Or you can also throw the ball in the air. So every time the ball hits its peak, I want you to click and just vary up how high you throw it. That way you're also prepared for some variation, because every cat's going to be different and you really want to be prepared to click when that specific cat is doing the right behavior. Okay, so clicker training on the why. So why do we use clicker training? So the number one reason is just a nice, clear message. So we don't speak the same language as cats. So how do we communicate to them that they did the behavior we were looking for? So a click sound at the moment they do the behavior is going to help them know that this is the behavior they were looking for, especially because, again, we follow that with a treat and they're working for the treat. Because we're able to also capture that exact moment, studies have found that cats learn behaviors quicker and they retain the behavior longer. So you're really able to send a clear message that allows them to really understand that behavior aspect and be able to do it at a later date. And then here in the shelter, we have a lot of people training, you being one of them. So we want to make sure that we are sounding the same across the board. So another type of marker-based training is using your voice. So you'll hear some people say things like good or yes. If everybody who was training the cats were to say good or yes, we're all going to sound a little different. So the clicker allows us to have the exact same sound no matter who does the clicking. So again, we're able to send that clear message to that cat, which is how they learn those behaviors quicker and again, ultimately retain them longer. So the how. So it's pretty easy to do clicker training. When you first get started, the easiest thing that you can do is, again, that click treat association that we keep talking about, sometimes called charging the clicker. So I click, I treat, I click, I treat, I click, I treat. That helps the cat learn that click means a treat is coming. Once you've made that connection to what clicker training is all about, that's where you start to work on specific behaviors. The easiest way is through something we call snapshot, also known as capture. So you're capturing the moment. Sitting is a great behavior to capture. Again, we don't want to force that cat to sit, so we wait until that cat actually sits down, and then we click and follow that with a treat. The other thing we can do is shaping. So shaping is basically just taking a behavior, usually a more complex behavior, and breaking it down into baby steps. So a common one you can think of is carrier training. So if I want to teach a cat to go into the carrier, I want to start to do behaviors that involve the carrier and build up to the cat going into the carrier. So for example, I can start with clicking and treating for the cat looking at the carrier. Eventually I can click and treat for the cat taking a step to the carrier. Next step would be sniffing the carrier, putting their head in the carrier, stepping in the carrier, all the way to the point of them going all the way into the carrier and me shutting the door. So my end behavior is them going into the carrier on their own, but I'm taking that behavior and breaking it down into baby steps and building up to that end result. Clicker training, again, is a way to get those behaviors on cue. So once your cat is reliably offering that behavior, that's when you start to associate the cue word. So you say it when they're doing it so they understand, they pair them up, and then eventually you can say it before they sit, for example, and then they would notice sit. For fearful cats, so some people may be asking themselves, well, if the initial sound is fearful for a lot of animals, how do you work through that? And so again, we want to do the click treat association to help them work through that. If we have a cat that's flinching or walking away and we just put the clicker away, we're never going to help them make that connection that click is a good thing and it means treat is coming. So what you can do is you can muffle your clicker, so you can put it behind your back or in your pocket. If you're using a click stick training device, you can make sure that the actual click part is extended further away from the actual cat. So just making it so it's not as close to their face, to their ear. And so that can kind of help. Again, you may still get a little flinching, but if you're able to push through that and let them learn that click means treat, then they're going to work through that and they're still going to start to learn after they make that connection that click is a good thing. Okay, so how does this help? So why are we clicker training cats in a shelter? So the main reason is stress relief. These cats are super stressed. They came into a shelter environment. There's a bunch of smells and people and other animals, and they're just overall really, really stressed. Clicker training is a great stress reducer. It allows them to focus on something else in this environment. It allows them also to problem solve and kind of work through that stress. For a lot of cats we get in, we don't always know a lot about them. They may be a found cat, a trapped cat. So clicker training is also a great way to learn stuff about that cat. That way we can then pass it on to the patrons who are adopting. Cats are also more attractive to patrons. So one of the behaviors we work on is something we call targeting your finger, which I'm going to talk about in a second. If a patron offers their hand out and a cat comes up to sniff that hand, that may be the one thing that gets that cat adopted. So again, it's just more attractive to the actual patron. And then lastly, there's again a lot of different people that interact with these cats while they are in the shelter. If we can help them work through some of their behavior concerns, fear, for example, overstimulation, we are helping them to be more manageable as other departments are working with these cats. We are also helping them to be more friendly and more interactive when they're in their kennels or in the adoption room. So across the board, we're helping both the cat and the people who are going to be dealing with these cats. So let me show you what it looks like.
Okay. Hello. Sit. Hello. Sit. Okay. Lick. Bye. That was a miss. Do it again. Headbutt. Oh, that was good. Touch. Good. Now. Tunnel.
So you probably heard in the video that this lady didn't click for every single behavior, and that's because a lot of the behaviors this cat already knew and was on cue. So she was clicking for some of the new behaviors. So like that hello behavior was something that she was still working on with this cat. So she was clicking for that behavior, whereas the ones that the cat already knew, she was still reinforcing, but she didn't click anymore. So here's another video of what it looks like.
Okay.
So here she's working on down with this cat. If you saw a couple times, the cat would just crouch down but not actually lay down. And so the whole idea of timing and when you click is also important, because if she were to click just for the cat crouching down, she is not actually capturing the true lay down. And so she may be reinforcing the wrong thing, which could send the wrong message. The other thing to keep in mind with cats, as you can see, is you have to have patience. So some behaviors are going to come really quick, things like the target behavior, but other ones are going to take a little bit longer. Laying down is actually pretty hard for a cat, because laying down is a behavior that they have to feel comfortable enough to do. Often here in the shelter, you'll see a cat crouch down, because that allows them to easily stand back up and move away. Laying down puts them in a little bit more of a vulnerable spot, and so they may not be as likely to lay down. And so when you are training more complex behaviors, it is about having the patience. And the last thing I want to point about this video is, because she was working on a behavior where the cat would be, stationary, she wanted to get the cat to move so that it could put it in a better position to lay down again. So when the cat would lay down, she would click, and then she would offer the treat quickly, but she would offer it a little bit away from the cat, so the cat had to stand up to go get the treat, which again just put the cat in a position to be able to lay down again. So what hurdles do we have to overcome when it comes to clicker training? So the number one thing that we have to worry about is that food motivation. So for those of you who have to work with cats in a shelter environment, when cats are really stressed, the one thing that they stop doing is eating. So if you have a cat that won't eat, how do you get them to eat even a high value item? So that is partly why we use high value items. We want to make sure that it's not a food item that they're getting on a regular basis. We also try to use things that are a little bit more stinky in nature. So the meat baby food, the tuna fish. So hopefully by them smelling it, they'd be more likely to want to eat it. But that is our biggest challenge in the shelter. But across the board, people who clicker train cats can struggle with that. Even in a home environment, you may have a cat that just isn't willing to try new things. So figuring out what they will eat is really going to be helpful. And then expectations. So when it comes to training cats, you will get a lot of people out there who think that that is not possible, that cats do not learn. Cats are not as smart as dogs, but cats are really, really smart. Again, it is about having that right motivation. So if you go into it thinking that this cat is not going to learn, you're probably not going to see the progress. On the other hand, when it comes to clicker training, it is a training that can solve some behavior concerns out there. So if someone goes into it thinking like this is the only thing that's going to solve my cat's behavior concerns, their expectations may be too high. And then when their cat doesn't start to change its behavior, they may start to get discouraged and then just give up altogether. So clicker training does work. There's a lot of evidence out there. Here in the shelter, we have seen many, many cats work through their behavior issues and get to the point where their stress level is down and they're able to go up for adoption. So we know it works, but we do know that it takes patience and that you have to have that motivation. So here's a little kind of drawing or chart of what behavior is all about. So you will see yourself under the cat section. That for cats, we do things like cat enrichment. We have a program called Kitty Comfort, which is a volunteer-based program of just spending time with cats, playing with them, offering treats, brushing them. We have a program that's specifically just play. We call it play therapy. It is where we are playing with cats, mostly those overstim cats, trying to get some of that frustration out. And then we have our training program. So training is broken down into cats and clickers and feline fortitude. So you guys will be starting with our cats and clickers cats. So let me tell you a little bit more about the difference between cats and clickers and feline fortitude. So cats and clickers is just supplemental mental stimulation energy release. So most of the cats that are enrolled strictly into cats and clickers are cats that just need a little bit more of an outlet. They're frustrated, depressed, anxious, so they're not needing to be held back for their behavior, but they could benefit from some positive reinforcement. Feline fortitude, on the other hand, are cats that are struggling with a certain type of behavior that is making it challenging to be in a shelter. So either they're not allowing handling, they're showing a high level of fear, and so we need to work with that behavior and try to resolve some of those issues before they can move along. So again, things like fear, socialization, overstimulation, handling. One that is a little confusing for people is our house soiling. So it is put under feline fortitude in chameleon, but it is not one that we hold back for. It is done for a system of just data collecting and stuff like that. So every other one, though, is something that we hold back for. So how do you identify cats that are in a behavior program? So just like everything else in Chameleon, we do have different memos and different reports that show the cats that are enrolled. So for our memos, you will see two types of memos. You will see cats and clickers and then the feline fortitude. But as far as the report goes, they are all on the same report. It's our cats and clickers daily rounds report. And so to know what cats you are going to be working with, you will get this report. You will get your name at the top, and we will highlight a bunch of cats. It's an average of 15 cats in the time that you come in for your volunteership, and you will be able to go work those cats. For staff members who are helping us out, we will do the same thing. We will highlight some cats for you so that you can kind of prioritize the ones that need to be worked. We try to stick to ones that are daily, some of our longest stays. So we'll highlight the cats that we would prefer that you go work with. This is kind of a memo in greater detail that you can see. So with behavior and clicker training and progression, you want to track your training sessions. That is how we can see how they did the day before. That is also how you will be able to know what you need to work on in your training session. And so when you come in for your hands-on training, we will go into more detail about how to fill out these memos, but you can kind of see it breaks it down on targeting, handling, reinforcement. So it's really important to note what you offer the cat, but also what the cat ate. And then the comment section is kind of a whole place of writing what you did throughout your whole session. So cats and clickers, how do they get to us? How do they get to behavior? How do they get enrolled? So any staff or volunteer can recommend a cat for enrollment into CNC. For staff members, you can place a cat on a CNC hold and just write in the flow what you would like us to enroll the cat in. For volunteers, you can fill out one of those needs attention slip, and same thing, just write what that cat would benefit from. And just as a reminder, these cats are not being held back from adoption. They are able to move through the system, go to surgery, be placed up for adoption. They just get that supplemental program. So the way that cats get to us that need feline fortitude, it's usually from our evaluation staff. So during that evaluation process, they are doing a lot of hands-on interactions, and there may be something about the cat's behavior that would warrant enrollment into feline fortitude. So the cat may be very fearful upon approach, hissing and growling. It may be a kitten that's darting around the kennel, or maybe the evaluation team was able to start to handle, but during the handling there was some overstimulation. Some other ways, though, that cats can come to us to get enrolled in feline fortitude, maybe from our adoption staff. So if a cat's been up for adoption for a couple months, they may start to regress in their behavior, start to show more fear or overstimulation. And the other staff that often send it to us is our healthcare team. A cat may pass its eval, but then be sent to healthcare, and during some sort of handling process in healthcare, the cat may struggle and again get sent to us to enroll it in feline fortitude. As a reminder, these cats are held back from adoption, so if that cat was already up for adoptions, we would be pulling it off the adoption floor to work on that behavior. The status for that cat is feline fortitude, so what that means is it is just primarily a behavior cat. So it can be seen by healthcare if needed, but it's not going to move along to surgery or to adoptions until it actually has passed behavior. So when I talked about figuring out what subtype or what specific plan we want to do for feline fortitude, this is kind of more of what I mean. So every cat has their own individualized plan. So we are going to work on whatever the main issue is. So for body handling, a common thing that cats struggle with is going to be pickups or maybe an oral exam. So our sessions are going to focus mostly on handling. Fear, anxiety. So this cat may be the one that's hissing, growling, swatting. So we are going to work on things like approaches, targets, handling as well, but just more to make them more comfortable. Frustration, so again, a cat that's just getting bored in the kennel, learning new things, so targeting is still really important, but again, just giving them something to do. House soiling, same idea, the stress reduction of things. Targeting is still really important for that because they're learning something new. Overstimulation, we're working more on building thresholds, so it's all about handling, but we're starting with minimal handling and building up to being able to do more. Again, we're also doing targeting to get them to move around their kennel. Play therapy is technically under our cats and clickers as far as our memo goes, so we're spending time playing with them. Socialization, our kittens usually are fearful kittens and under-socialized kittens, so we're working more on making good associations with them and work on handling. And then soiling is for cats that are actually soiling in the shelter. So house soiling are cats that have a history of it. Soiling, if you see that subtype, it's because the cat's actually soiling in the shelter. But same idea. We're working on stress reduction and just learning new behavior in a stressful environment to help them kind of work through the stress that may be leading to the soiling. So during your shift, what you will do is you will come get your list of cats from us. You will then go look up your cat. Again, why you're looking up your cats is because you want to see what happened in the session before so that you can know what to work on in your session. For example, if you are working on handling, if somebody, was only petting the head and the cat did well with that, maybe your progression is going to be to try to do a body pet and see if the cat's going to do well with that. So reading the cat's notes beforehand is going to just help you in your session during that day. Then you will go do your training sessions and make notes. That can be mental notes, or if you need to write them down, feel free to write them on that report that we're going to give you. And then you're going to go do your computer entry. So you're going to find a computer and you're going to write in your notes for that memo so that you can track your individual session so that the person who comes after you is going to know what you did, but also again where to work off. Some people find they can write lots of little notes for them and go put their notes in after having done 5 cats. You'll figure it out. You may need to work a couple, go put in notes, work a couple, go put in notes. But again, before you leave, before you're done with your shift, you want to make sure that your notes were entered for your individual sessions. So during your sessions, you're going to be working on, again, we kind of talked about a couple main things. The first one and the most important is targeting. So targeting is really simple. It is the cat touching their nose to an object. The object that we use is going to either be that click stick, which is that training tool, or your finger. Hands sometimes can be scary. So in that video that you saw with the lady and that black cat, she was able to offer her whole hand and the cat did come touch it. But here in the shelter, because hands coming out of cat can be scary as far as the whole hand, we usually just use our finger. And again, when the cat comes up to touch our finger, we're going to click and treat. Cats will not always make direct contact, so you won't always feel them. So really it's trying to get to as far as they're willing to go to extend their neck. You click and you treat for that. The other thing is the handling. So again, we're looking at it from the perspective of what the cat needs. Are we working on being able to check their teeth? Are we being able to work on pickups? Maybe we're working on building up threshold for an overstim cat. So we're just starting with minimal handling and building up to being able to do several full body pets in a row. During your session, you can also play. So don't feel like you can't bring out other tools when you're engaging with these animals. Sometimes cats need a little bit of a break and need to be able to make a different connection with you during that session. So for instance, kittens, if your kitten isn't doing that great during your training session, so they're not really targeting very well, and they don't really want you to touch them, then how else do you connect with them? And play is a great way. So you can pull out that little wand toy and move it around the kennel. So even if that kitten only looks at that toy, it is still engaging. And that's just a nice way to be able to connect with that kitten by having something that seems more natural. Play is a natural behavior that if they can start by just watching it, and then as they get more comfortable, get to the point where they're pawing at it when it comes close, then we're able to still make a connection with our sessions, even if that cat or kitten in that moment isn't doing any target training. Cat's progression. So again, we talked about why we want to keep track of those sessions, and that's really to be able to see the progress that they're making. So for cats that are enrolled in Feline Fortitude, because we are holding them back, we do need to make sure that we are not only keeping track of that progress, but that we are taking the time to do what we call a formalized recheck. So after 6 sessions, we will look at that cat and we are looking for progression. They don't have to be perfect by any means. The cat doesn't have to love to be picked up, but can we pick it up? The cat may still be nervous upon approach, but is it warming up? Is it allowing us to pet? That overstim cat is probably still going to show some overstim signs. It might still twitch its tail or ripple its skin, but are we able to do what we need to do and pet that cat and pick that cat up so that we can manage that cat while in the shelter. If the cat has progressed, then we will graduate from our program and move it along to whatever the next step is, eventually adoption. If there is no progress, then there's a couple things that we can do. We can always extend a cat 3 more sessions to continue to work on a specific behavior. We can send them out to our behavior foster homes. So we do have a great network of behavior foster homes that basically do clicker training in a home environment. We can send some of these guys to placement partners or PP options. So there are some cat rescues that are willing to take some of these cats that have behavior concerns. We may also consider putting that cat up. So even if it didn't totally work through its behavior issues, we may still determine that that cat is safe, and we can put it up with a behavior release and definitely some higher restrictions. We may send that cat working cat. So we are fortunate to have a working cat program here at the Dumb Friends League. So what we could do if that cat is just not progressing, is not a house cat material, we can look into a working cat option. But lastly, we do want to make sure that you guys are aware that we may also have to decide to euthanize. So sometimes these cats are having a poor quality of life, so they're so shut down. Maybe they are peeing in the box they're laying in, and then they're just laying in that. They're so stressed that they're not even willing to leave that box, even though it has pee in. Or maybe they're unsafe. Maybe they are an overstim cat that has escalated to biting and breaking skin, or that cat that is so fearful that it's still hissing and lunging and swatting. If we have a cat that's unsafe or, again, poor quality of life, we may choose to do the most humane thing for it, which would be euthanasia. So something we ask all volunteers and staff to do while they are here in the shelter, even if they're not a Cats and Clickers volunteer, is to reinforce positive behaviors. So an easy thing to do, even when you're not actually training cats, is to really reinforce those relaxed postures. So wait for the cat to engage you. Wait before you go in and reach and touch that cat. Make sure that the cat is relaxed and comfortable with you in the presence. If you are having to move that cat from one room to another or take it to a visiting room and you have to use a carrier, reinforce this time in the carrier. You can always put treats in that carrier. You can always give the cat treats for going in the carrier. In the visiting room with the patrons, having them reinforce the time in and out of the carrier. Again, the best way to help these cats learn relaxed postures and engaging with people is to have that consistency. So if you can really help them in your interactions to reinforce those positive behaviors, that again is going to help somebody else who has to come along. Communicating with behavior. So if you do ever need us, again, those needs attention slips are always the easiest way if you are a volunteer. So filling out one of these. As a reminder, the most important thing is that animal ID number. That is a number that is never going to change, whereas sometimes the animal name may change and the kennel is obviously going to change. So make sure you write down the animal ID number and then just list what the issue is. So possible medical issues, so these are non-emergency medical issues. Behavior, if you just worked a cat in behavior, we obviously don't need you to fill out a needs attention slip about the specific behavior we know about, but maybe that cat has gotten worse. Maybe that cat was just twitching its tail, but now it is swatting. That is something that we would want to know, that that cat is starting to escalate. Grooming, so if a cat needs a nail trim, brush, or is matted, definitely fill out one of the needs attention slip for that. And then just give it back to us. We do have a couple spots around the shelter that you can drop these needs attention slips off so that we can actually take a look at them. We do only look at these once a day, which is why we need you to make sure not to put emergency situations on here. We'd rather you come find a staff member or even go directly to healthcare if you know where healthcare is located. So after adoption, some people do wonder if they work with these cats, what happens to them from a behavior perspective once they are adopted. And so we do provide resources for our adopters. So for some of our cats, we will actually talk to them at time of adoption. We will talk about how to help them transition in the home. We will talk about continued behavior modification. We may talk about intros to other animals, just ways that they can help this cat settle in, but also to reduce some of those behavior concerns like overstim. After they adopt, we do still have resources for them. So we do, for every cat that is enrolled in Cats and Clickers or Feline Fortitude, we do have a generated follow-up call. We have some great volunteers that call these patrons and try to connect with them and just see how the cat is adjusting. We also have the ability for patrons to talk to us. So we have a free behavior helpline service where they can sign up for an appointment and we will call them at that specific time and talk about any issues. And then we have some wonderful resources on our website, handouts. That free behavior helpline service is on our website as well. So they can go to our website, find those resources, print out a handout, sign up for that appointment, and we can continue to provide those resources even after the cat has left the shelter. So that is it for Cats and Clickers. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. So again, the next step is going to be to do some hands-on training where we are going to have you practice doing clicker training. And we're also going to work with you on writing those notes because sometimes those can be hard. Sometimes we find ourselves being subjective and putting in our feelings. But with these notes, we really want to be objective. So we will work with you on how to put in appropriate notes, be able to clearly show what happened during that interaction so that the next person who goes and works that cat is going to have a better picture. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch Cats and Clickers. Have a good day.